This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country and join their calls for justice. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
I bring the fire.
Are you fired up and ready?
Freya Leach is bringing the heat to Sky News Australia.
This is where you'll get heated debates from all sides. And when I say heated, I mean confrontational, controversial, robust, serious, the whole lot. And that's just the start of it.
Freya Fires Up. Starts Sunday, August 17 on Sky News.
Don't laugh, Emerald. I'm really sad about Freya Leach. A Sky News Australia program has been axed after airing anti-Islam guest wearing shirt covered in bacon. This is very serious.
Particularly in the context of your anti-woke, anti-cancellation crusade, which I understand is what your new play is about or something.
That's not what my play is about. It's a very nuanced discussion about the limits of comedy and words you can and can't say, actually. See, typical left-wing people try to cancel a thing they haven't even fucking seen. Tickets are on sale now. Definitely come along. 8 p.m. at the Trades Hall in Melbourne as part of the Melbourne Fringe. Jokes and comedy. So you haven't seen this clip? You haven't seen any of this?
No. What happened? Freya Leach, she got a show and then an anti-Islam guy came on. He was wearing bacon to be deliberately offensive,
Yes.
which, you know, different from being funny as I understand it. And that's your show. And now she's cancelled. Well, her show is cancelled, but she's not cancelled. Is that pretty much it?
6 episodes in. That is a great summary there. The show's called Freya's Fired Up, and it was, of course, promoted as like the most controversial show. You're going to get all the hot takes and, all angles, all views are going to be platformed. We're going to have really interesting and controversial and, unexpected. It's a free speech zone. And, it gets this guy on. He's called the Scottish Korean. Apparently he was on Love is Blind, according to Mike Griffin.
Wait, he's not... Okay, sorry, yeah, I'll have to look because I'm a Love is Blind fan and there was this one guy who was absolutely insane. But sorry, we don't have time, so go on. That's just
He is
law.
crazy. Yeah. So, again, people should check out the Media Watch segment on this. Apparently, they were going into a show. They had a pre-recorded segment that a producer saw and said, you can't put that to air. That's been dumped. So, on the show, they're like, fuck, we've got to fill time here. So, they had as much time as possible for this guy.
And we don't know what
we don't know what this unseen
pre-recorded
thing. And we'll never know. It will never be released. Release the tapes, Freya. Release the tapes.
Yes.
But it was the Scottish Korean guy, another guy, Jimmy, who's an absolute fuckhead, of course, as well, for his own different reasons, different commentator. But yes, rashes of bacon on his shoulders to protect himself from beheadings and basically, horrific Islamophobic, bigoted nonsense about Muslims supporting the subjugation of women and, of course, worshipping a pedophile. Truly disgusting comments. And in the Sky News producers' defense, there's no way they could have seen this happening other than the fact that this guy is regularly posting exactly the same things that he said during their segment on his social media, and his massive following is exactly why they booked him for the segment.
Who could have predicted this? Yeah.
The one thing
we got on the guy who says offensive things about Muslims, and then he started saying offensive things about Muslims.
It's crazy, man.
Crazy.
Who could have known? I like this article. Some have argued privately that Leach has been hung out to dry by the network compared to other older male hosts who are often criticised for offensive comments on air. Now, to me, that sounds like toxic identity politics to me, but that's just
This is
me,
always
I
a class.
suppose.
Yeah, I don't know. When people do this argument, they're like, she wouldn't have been treated that way if she wasn't a woman. Yeah, probably. But also, she still sucks.
Yes, but it's Sky News. What the hell do you want? You want principled positions on journalistic ethics? Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So the show Freya Fires Up, they said maybe, okay, we're going to stop making it live TV and we're going to make it pre-recorded. And then they said, no, the whole show is totally cancelled. But the way she's been dumped is she is still going to continue as the co-host of Sky's The Late Debate, which airs 4 nights a week on the network.
Oh, wow. Okay. I mean, that makes it's like you start to wonder, did she need a proper cancellation under her belt so that she can really say that she is too hot for television, and that's why you should watch her on her other television show?
Well, but it's all Sky News. You can't say I'm too hot for Sky News. Catch me on Sky News on the 4 other nights of the week.
Yes, you can, and she will. Yes.
Because once again, we cannot repeat this enough. Freya Leach's origin story is being at Sydney University, being right-wing and claiming that a question on her law exam in which a right-wing person called Freya kills a left-wing person was deliberately targeted at herself. That is the thing that got her started, that got her attention.
How she
That
began.
would then see her. I mean, her rise to fame is insane, right? So that's obviously how she gets the media attention. Then she gets pre-selected for the seat of Balmain in 2023.
Yeah.
Then at 20 years old, she receives swinging endorsements from prominent party figures. She then takes a job with the Liberal-aligned Menzies Research Centre, okay? And then bingo, bango, straight on to Sky News. She's 23. So the law question thing was when she was 19. She's now 23. And she's already got her own live TV show on Sky News and being cancelled from it for Islamophobic
People
bigotry.
hate ambitious young women, but she's not going to stop fighting, Tom.
Let's go, girls.
These remarks were wholly inappropriate and unacceptable and have no place on our network. The guest responsible should never have appeared. We have begun an immediate review to prevent this type of incident from occurring again.
We're stuck with the hosts of Chapo Shithouse podcast.
Serious danger to Australia.
Let's go, girls. This is Serious Danger, a podcast about green politics in Australia. It's not an official Green Party podcast. I'm Emerald. That's Tom. I am on Yugara and Turrbal land. Tom, I believe, is on Wurundjeri country.
I'm in Naarm, home of the Melbourne Fringe, where you can catch my play Jokes, a Comedy, until October the 12th.
Here's hoping that maybe a few hours after some people listening to this episode, Melbourne gets absolutely flogged by the Broncos.
Oh, yes.
That is the NRL
happen.
Grand Final happening.
Sports
this
ball.
week.
No, thank you.
Sports. Absolutely. What is that? I'm an intellectual. I have a play screening now. Screening? That's not what a play does. Anyway, we're kind of doing a rushed introduction because we are about to get a special guest on the line. This week we're joined by leader of the ACT Greens, Shane Rattenbury, to check in on how the party has been doing in the ACT, the nation's capital, and some recent wins and a bit of a other chat on the housing front. So he's joining us in like 1 minute. So quickly, before then, we have to say, this is in real life as well.
Yes, in real life. Thank you to the new patrons who are supporting the show. We love you. You keep the lights on here at Serious Danger HQ. Kimmy, Ali, Madeline, Michelle, Jared Mazza, friend of the show, two-time guest, now becoming a patron and a danger dog. We love to see it. David and Thomas, thank you so much for $3 a month. You get bonus content like this week's Patrons episode, which was another installment of our Inside the Greens series, reading Paddy Manning's Inside the Greens, Chapter 10, Part 2, Milne Rebuilds. That was a fantastic conversation. Become a patron if you want to hear it.
And quick reminder, we will be in Melbourne for our 200th episode live show on Saturday, the 1st of November at 4 p.m. at Comedy Republic. And if you haven't got tickets yet, you should grab them. There are less than a dozen tickets left at the time of recording. It's selling super fast. We have a very special guest joining us, Mr. Wil Anderson. And it will be my last episode, my last weekly episode. I will be back on the Patreon, but I'll only be behind the paywall. So come see me well, it still costs $30, so it's not free. But anyway, tickets are $30. You know what I mean. The link's in the show notes. See you there.
Speaking of Victoria, quick plug and a big thanks to our beautiful listener, Colin, for giving us the heads up on this. Victorian Greens members will know there is a state conference coming up on Saturday, October the 25th, and going to conference is always good to participate in the democratic running of your party. That's always good. And there are two very special resolutions that might be of interest to Danger Dogs. First of all, a proposal to institute direct election of the state party leader and deputies by party members from 2027. Emerald, can you believe it?
We love to hear it. Listeners,
obviously,
we stand direct election of the leader.
We stand
so that's exciting.
We like this. It's inspired by the mechanism used by the Green Party of England and Wales. It would have the state party run a leadership election every 2 years, which is interesting, with terms beginning around 18 months or 6 months after each state election or earlier as needed if positions became vacant. Members could choose one leader, two co-leaders, or even no leader at all, as is the case in New South Wales and Queensland, of course. Or two deputy leader spots with a mandated gender balance. I'm saying you don't have a leader. Yeah, okay, right. Yeah. And the first election wouldn't be until early 2027. So if this resolution passed this year, we'd have a bit of time to figure it out. Yes, we've been very open with our general vibe that leaders should be elected by the membership. And if you agree with that, or maybe you vehemently disagree with that. Regardless, you should have your say and get involved in the state conference. There's also a resolution to add ownership of more than 2 residential properties to the list of automatic rejection triggers for someone applying to be a Greens candidate.
Spicy.
This is spicy stuff.
Yeah.
So you could have more than 2. So you could have 2
You can have
residential. Oh, no. You have 2
one
residential
investment
properties.
property.
When we live, 1 investment property. If you have more than that, then you cannot be a Greens candidate. Encouraging people to divest from property speculation before standing as a candidate.
Definitely
Anyway.
something that I've heard raised before. I don't know if we've actually discussed it on the show, but it's interesting. It's probably good. I don't know. Yeah, I would love to be a Victorian Greens member listening to that debate because I think it'd be interesting.
It'd be interesting. Inspired somewhat, I believe, by the Victorian Socialist position that they sort of say no landlords stand as candidates.
Yeah,
and they're quite proud of that. And I think they've, settled on that policy to differentiate themselves from some Greens MPs and such. Anyway, you know the deal.
Yes.
This state conference is happening on Saturday, October the 25th. It's all online. There is an email out there. I know we get lots of emails from the Greens all the time, but double check them. If you're a Victorian Greens member, come along, have your say, participate in beautiful democracy.
It's a pillar. It's a pillar of the Greens. Also, I was just going to point out that we did this first. Queensland Greens, we have direct election of leader.
What? But you don't have a leader?
Not yet, because we don't have enough MPs. But we changed our rules like a few years ago.
Oh,
so
okay, right. So
for
if the
direct
party
election.
ever has.
Yeah.
Oh, I see, I see. Right, sorry.
Sadly, we have but one.
An incredible controversy at the University of Sydney raises the prospect that a 19-year-old female student active in the Liberal and Conservative clubs has been indirectly targeted in a criminal law exam question. Many students contacted Freya Leach after they were set a detailed question that included references to a Mercedes-driving right-wing student called Freya killing a woke student and having unprotected sex while HIV positive. Now, I'm not surprised your friends were contacting you thinking this was you. What do you think has gone on here?
We have no idea. At worst, it was malicious. At best, it was utterly incompetent. I find it extremely hard to believe no one could conduct a 3-second search of the class list and realise there was a Freya. Not only was there a Freya, in my class there's also an Adam and a Zoe, 2 other characters which are also mentioned in the exam. It was just horrible, and to be vilified in such a graphic way and for that to be distributed to 400 peers makes me wonder what is going on.
Well, the university denies this is deliberate. They say they used the name Freya in a previous exam question, but they won't supply the question. And it goes to your point. I would have thought they know the names in the class. They could easily use other names, but Freya is not a very common name.
That's right.
All right, we are coming up on a year since we had a territory election in the Australian Capital Territory, where the Greens, very sadly, lost 2 seats to independents, putting the party on the crossbench for the first time since 2012, and we lost those ministry portfolios as well. But ACT Greens still got 15% of the primary vote. We still won 4 seats. Labor still needs support from the Greens to get stuff through. They're still in there fighting the good fight. So we thought we'd check in on how the ACT Greens are doing and talk about some wins they've had recently, particularly on the housing front. We'll come to that in a moment. And there is no one better to do that than the leader of the ACT Greens. He's been the leader since 2012. He was the first Green speaker in any parliament in the whole bloody world. He's the party spokesperson for a lot of things, including housing, climate change mitigation, treasury and justice. Shane Rattenbury, hello, sir. Thank you very much for being on Serious Danger.
Well, thanks for having me on.
No worries. Okay, we take our research very seriously here at Serious Danger. So I went to your Wikipedia, and we just need to discuss the fact that under your personal life section, the only thing that's listed is that in 2019, you admitted that you tried the drug MDMA once in your 20s.
Oh, God, I need to go and edit my Wikipedia then. I haven't looked at it for a while. Yeah, look, that was a weird moment.
Come on, Shane. We know you added this yourself.
No, I don't read my own Wikipedia that often, I have to confess. But that was a weird moment. I was doing an interview with the ABC. We were canvassing to have pill testing introduced here in the ACT, which we won. We won that campaign.
Yeah.
We now have a permanent pill testing site here in the Territory, which is fantastic.
That's great.
In the course of the interview, the ABC journalist said to me, "Have you ever taken drugs yourself?" And in that split second, you're like, where's this going? I generally take the view it's better just to answer the question. I mean, oh, yeah, once at this party, blah, blah, blah. It was a Greenpeace Christmas party many years ago.
Greenpeace Christmas party.
Fucking
that
awesome.
was the context we needed. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely.
And so I just answered it and it became a whole thing. And what got weirder later was that other MPs in the building were sort of complaining at me for sort of making the story about me. It was like, no, I was just answering the question.
Yeah.
You answered
They
a
just
question.
asked. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
They're like, I've done MDMA too. Where's my fucking story?
I
was
used some
more worried it
heroin
was
this
gonna
morning.
Kill my credibility in the Greens because having only done it once, you're like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Embarrassing stuff.
What are you, a
I can tell you
narc, for
myself.
God's sakes?
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's great. I think it's great that you're public about it. I think it's great that it's in your Wikipedia. I'm just concerned that it's the only thing listed in your personal life. I just hope that, since your 20s, you've done some other fun stuff. And
well, I
made
like
out
to
with
think
some
I
people,
have.
but-
And
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go in and get someone to edit it or edit
Journalists
myself.
just haven't asked you about it yet, maybe. Yeah.
Yes. All
Gotta ask
right.
the right
Well,
questions.
that's coming.
Mm.
So we're a year on since that election, 2024, the territory election. Yes, ACT Greens went from 6 to 4 seats, moved on to the crossbench. 2 of those seats went to independents. Yeah, be interested in your thoughts. A year on, what's your reflection on that particular election there? What happened, I suppose, from the party's point of view?
Yeah, look, in terms of the result, at the 2020 election, we had 2 seats. We went up to 6, so we had this extraordinary growth. And then we did lose a couple. It's the highest number of seats we've ever attained, if that makes sense. So from a growth point of view, it's, we're still sort of building, and we've had previous elections where we've dropped back further. And so at one level, not too bad. Now, vote went down just over 1%. The Labor Party's vote went down 3.7%, and they had their lowest primary vote this century for the Labor Party in the ACT. So in that context, we had been part of a Labor Greens power sharing government for 12 years. And I think we took a little bit of, a bit of paint off from people feeling like they weren't seeing us making enough change. And we sort of shared that frustration in the sense it's, in a 2-party government, you're a little bit constrained by what the other party is willing to agree to as well. And whilst we made a lot of changes, I think there was some, people were looking for some changes, and there was a sort of, those in government got a bit of a backlash out of that. And we obviously took a little bit of that as well.
What are the lessons that you learned from that, from having a portfolio in a power sharing arrangement with a Labor government? Because, of course, we talk about that as a party, that being the goal, and people point to examples like Tasmania and ACT as occasionally success stories, and then obviously sometimes it goes to shit somewhat, to put it bluntly. What's your experience of being a minister in a Labor Greens government, and what are the lessons for the party on that front moving forward?
It's such an interesting question, and one I think we're still reflecting on. Being in the ministry and in the cabinet office, you have enormous opportunities. You've got the direct portfolios, you work with big public service agencies, you've got an ability to make things happen reasonably quickly at times, or gradually shift things along in the cabinet process. A great example of that would be in 2020, we went to the election saying we wanted to start phasing out fossil fuel gas. And both the Labor Party and the Liberal Party came out and said, that is crazy. The Labor Chief Minister said, we won't be adopting crazy Greens policies like this.
Yeah.
And yet by 2022, I got a gas phase out through Cabinet. It's official government policy. And I was able to get Treasury on board and work with my climate agency to make it happen. And that the same Labor Chief Minister signed off on that policy. And it's now the ACT is moving along that pathway. And so that's the positive side of it. You can really make stuff happen. Interestingly, since we stepped out of government, and it was our choice to leave the government, a lot of people have said, you must have much more freedom now. And so it's really interesting the way our own voters and our own people perceive that. They're like, you were really constrained. But in many ways, we were at times dragging the government towards our agenda. So I think there's a lot of communication to be done about being a small party in government as well.
Sorry, can you explain that a little bit more? What does it mean? What do you mean when you say it was the party's decision to leave government?
Well, come 2024 election, we still held the balance of power.
Right.
We sat down. There's 25 seats in the Assembly. Labor has 10. The Greens have 4. The Libs have 9.
Right.
And there's 2 independents. So we hold the balance of power still. We are the ones who get to shape who is the government.
Got you.
And we sat down and had negotiations with the Labor Party to potentially form a new government. And they just weren't willing to move on some key issues. To have a partnership, you each need to be able to move your own agendas forward. And you need to support the other party to do that. And at the election, we had talked specifically about the need for a big investment in public housing and to keep moving forward on climate and environment action. When we got into the negotiations, the Labor Party were just not willing to put money into those key areas. They had their agenda. And they said, well, the budget's tight and we got our election commitments. There's no money left to really do the things you want to do. And that is not a basis to form an arrangement together. There's pluses and minuses in being in government, and to where the minuses, there's got to be some pluses.
Yeah.
And there just was a movement on those issues. And that's what we'd say to the voters were our priorities. And if we couldn't move on them, we couldn't be part of that government. And so we said, well, actually, no, thanks very much, but we're not going to be part of it.
They're also everyone's priorities, by the way. Climate and fucking housing crisis. Isn't that everyone's priority? For God's
Should
sake?
be, yeah. Why do you think that Labor maybe kind of changed their approach then from previous governments or parliaments where they had been willing to sit down and make concessions?
Look, I think tensions had been building up. In any long-term relationship, there's a degree of tension and, gripes that build up. And
are you in a long-term relationship? Your personal life is just about you taking drugs. So I don't know.
Well, exactly.
Wouldn't know.
But, we had been in the cabinet for 12 years in various forms. It'd been me for a couple of terms. Then there were 3 Greens ministers last term in a cabinet of 9. So we had a lot of influence and a lot of portfolios. But on these key issues, basically the answer was we're not prepared to put any more ACT government money into public housing. We've got to rely on what the feds are putting in. So in the state of this housing crisis, we just have to do more.
Yeah.
My sense of the last couple of big elections for us here and the federal election is people are losing a bit of faith in government to be able to deliver for them the basic needs: housing, equality, climate, environment action. These are the things we know lots of voters just see as the fundamentals government should be delivering on. They're not seeing it being delivered. They're seeing governments being a bit timid. And we don't want to be part of one of those governments.
Yeah.
And what do you think when you look at what's been happening in Tassie with this kind of very blunt ultimatum again, the Labor Party foregoing the opportunity to form a minority government with the Greens because they don't want to negotiate with the party whatsoever? What do you make of that?
Look, it was a bizarre situation where the Labor Party said we won't even talk. Now, there's a whole history in Tasmania politics of which I'm not an expert. I take an interest, but for years now, Labor have taken this approach, and it's very different between Tasmania and the ACT. We have the same electoral system and a lot of similarities, but we don't have in ACT some of those really fundamental resource issues like logging and fish farming that the Labor Party has a bizarre position on in Tasmania.
Yeah, true.
All right. That's one bonus. Talking federally, we also had the 2025 federal election, and there was a pretty remarkable 3.6% swing against the party in the federal election. We saw a massive swing to David Pocock in the Senate. Be interested in your thoughts on there. Is the ACT a pretty teal-friendly jurisdiction, or what do you make of the election in 2025 for the party?
Yeah, look, no doubt about it. The ACT is a teal-friendly jurisdiction. I think it's the fact that we've had the Labor Party's been in power here since 2001. So, it'll be 27 years at the next ACT election. It's an extraordinary period of time.
Wow.
It's undoubtedly a progressive electorate. And David Pocock was able to knock off Zed Zelja in the previous federal election because of that frustration our community had, our progressive community, with Zed Zelja, who was sort of at the really reactive end of the Liberal Party. And so David Pocock came along and was able to both harness a lot of progressive votes but also pick up just enough of the sort of, progressive end of the Liberal Party.
Right.
Can't think of the right term for that, but, that sort of centrist, part of the Liberal Party who were frustrated by that he was able to build a quota, and then since he's got there, he's really built his profile and done very well. And we're in a time where the independent sentiment is very strong. I think it's going to be really interesting to see if that lasts, because our experience of having had a couple of independents elected here in the Territory is they're very good at bringing forward individual issues. They pick up community things, they bring them into the Assembly, but the difference the Greens offer is that real systemic long-term challenge to the system, which one individual cannot do. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how long this sort of sense of the independents are, the difference people are looking for, can last.
There was an article headlined, Rattenbury sees reasons for optimism in Green's bittersweet result. but it was behind a paywall, so I couldn't read, read it. I
Sorry about that.
trying to access what's the hope and optimism. But it was you reacting to the response after the 2025 election. It seems you're saying the success of some independents, and I guess the result suggests people moving away from the two-party system in a way with some pretty low primary votes, and obviously the collapse of the coalition. So that's, good news in one respect that people are open to other suggestions, and obviously we know the Greens' national vote remains steady, but we obviously lost the seats. But you think there's a little bit of optimism to be seen there that people are prepared to put their votes elsewhere, which could be good opportunities for us in the future.
Yeah, great perception, Tom. Without even getting through the paywall, you pretty much picked up the points I was making, which was that, in seeing voters willing to go away from the two big parties, they are open to different propositions.
Yeah.
And, whilst the Greens, we held our vote steady, and I guess part of that optimism was in the face of significant attacks from both Advance and from the ALP, the Greens vote was steady. Now, the losing the seats, and particularly losing Adam, losing the seats generally was, obviously a real shock for us. And it also speaks to the nature of being a smaller party. And we had the same in the ACT. Our vote didn't shift that much, but we sit on those fine margins where we're just winning the seats. And so a small shift can have a big impact. Whereas here in the ACT, the Labor Party lost 3 times as much vote as we did. Their seat numbers stayed exactly the same.
Yeah.
That's the nature of the Hare Clark system a little bit, but it's the nature of seats generally, I think.
Yeah.
I've heard that, the fact that you don't have federal representation is a challenge for the ACT Greens. It obviously means that all the, territory level reps have to sort of deal with everything, and you don't quite have the resources or the support of having, say, a federal senator. There's some vague talk about expanding the Senate federally. Of course, the question of statehood always hangs over our two territories. Oh, you're laughing at the very concept. Okay, is that ever going to happen? Or what's more likely, that you'll get more senators or that you become a state? What's the progress of that?
No one in the ACT is talking about becoming a state.
Okay.
I guess it's not on our radar.
Interesting.
I don't mean to sort of dismissively laugh at it, but it's just not the discussion we're having particularly. I think certainly an increase in Senate representation would be a better outcome for the territory to give us a better breadth of voices. Historically, we've only had one Labor and one Liberal senator. David Pocock breaking through is a great outcome. But it also means that those people with a more conservative bent don't have any representation out of the territory now. And you might argue from a democracy point of view, that's probably not a fair representation of the territory.
Right. But we don't really care about that.
Yes, in my less magnanimous moments, you might say that.
No. A voice for everyone. And you've been Attorney General, so you'll know this. So they don't need to change the Constitution in order to increase the number of senators, but they would need to increase the number of lower house seats to make that constitutionally valid. Have I got that right?
Yeah, there is a link there between the number of Senate seats and the number of lower house seats that does need to be sorted out.
Right. It's got to be, double number of House of Reps than Senate, I think, or as close to as possible, I think. Okay, so that is possible without having a referendum, but that's good to know. Good luck with that.
Yeah, but with the growing population, you could make the argument that we increase the number of House of Reps seats because the number of people that each House of Reps member is representing is growing all the time. And so, it's not unreasonable to think about an increase in the number of House of Reps seats.
Isn't there a bit of a, what am I thinking of? It's like a cumulative or a self-propelling, these are not the right words, but it's like you get more politicians in the federal parliament, more people move to Canberra, and then you have population growth in Canberra, so Canberra needs more representatives, so you have more people living in Canberra.
Shit.
I see what you're getting at here.
Goddamn right.
Exposed, and it took you two to finally expose me. This is great.
Anything to get more people to go to Canberra. What a pathetic city. Jeez. No, I love Canberra. Canberra gets a lot of shit. I like it. Not obviously the politicians, but it's a nice place to visit. Yeah, it's quite nice. All right, last question for me before we get into the nitty-gritty of housing. Would love to hear about, the year since the territory election and all the other fights and wins that you guys have been having in Parliament in this new system with your 4 seats under the new Labor government that you're now out of. Yeah, what are the big fights that have been coming up and where have the ACT Greens been focusing their energies?
Yeah, look, we're sitting on the crossbench purely now, as opposed to previous terms we had ministers and crossbenchers. Certainly for me, it's been a big personal change after 12 years as minister and being Attorney General and a range of other portfolios. But we're still doing the things the Greens have always done. We're focused on housing, environment, climate change, inequality, the things that our party really cares about and we know our voters care about. We've been able to really use our power in a different way. We weren't part of the budget process here. I've spent the last few years in the Expenditure Review Committee of Cabinet, so it's a really different approach to the budget. But this year we saw the Labor Party come out with a $250 flat levy for, they call it a health levy, to help fund the health system.
On who?
And we sort of sat here and said, well, that's not a great way to go about things. It's a regressive tax, hits people who don't necessarily have the means to pay for it. And so we stood up to that and said,
it was everyone, right?
Just on everyone, you mean?
On all taxpayers?
Well, every household, every
Every
rate-paying
Wow.
household.
Right.
Now, we'd been campaigning for a tax on the biggest corporations in town, the ones that had an annual turnover of $200 million or more. So this is the banks, the big supermarkets, Qantas.
The battlers,
Barney.
you mean, Shane? The battlers and the wealth creators and the
Pillars
lifters.
of society.
Is that who you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the ones who are making big revenue in this town and who frankly should be paying more. And we said, well, they should pay more in payroll tax. And so we were able to go into the budget negotiations and say, we won't support that health levy.
Yeah.
We want this increase on the big corporations instead. And we won that one.
Oh.
And so now we are seeing
Yeah,
those corporations
balance of power.
putting in more. And ironically, over the 4-year budget cycle, that'll generate more revenue than the health levy on individual households.
You'll love this, Emerald. In the budget, they're saying, Labor's saying there's a $50 million hole here. How are we going to fund this big gap for health spending? In the same budget, there was an $8 million subsidy for the horse racing industry.
Good.
And so that's about 16%
help me
of your $50
balance
million
this.
right there.
Yeah, far
Yeah,
out.
we've been fighting hard against that one. It's the classic case where when you call a division, you find the Greens on one side of the chamber.
Yeah.
Because we just moved this in the budget debate a week or so ago to remove this $8 million subsidy to the horse racing industry.
Yeah.
There was the Greens on one side, Labor, Liberal, and the Independents on the other side.
Oh, God.
Wonderful.
Indies. Mm.
Wonderful. And did
Really
any of
great.
those parties take any donations from the sort of lobby firms that represent that particular industry? Do we know? Or
Not that we've specifically tracked down. No.
okay.
Damn.
No, they just seem to have a
result that
They
Tom
seem to
was
have a
Tom was
particular
trying to set you
influence.
up
Oh, okay.
there for.
I was thinking, yeah, okay. But maybe they just really love horse racing then, I guess, which is
But I mean, sure, but
still
yeah, but those
incorrect.
they're federal parties like Labor and the LNP take significant donations from
Sure.
the gambling lobby,
Mm.
the racing industry.
true.
So yeah,
Well, that was
in
another
the
one,
ACT,
right?
the Labor Party owns clubs that have poker machines.
What?
the Labor
Try to
Party.
do gaming
What?
reform in the ACT with that scenario.
I didn't even know that was a thing that you could do. Wow.
Can you even
Yeah.
do that?
The
That's
Labor
great.
clubs between them have around, I haven't looked at the figures for a while, but it'd be in the order of 400 odd poker machines.
Oh my god!
Yeah,
And
That
that
is
was another.
fucked.
Yeah, that was another fight, right? Some pokey machine reform that you guys have been campaigning on.
Yeah, I was, for my sins, the Minister for Gaming last term,
Right.
responsible for poker reform.
Not the
and we
Nick
did try to set
McKim
up.
kind of gaming, the bad kind. Not the
Yeah,
Fortnite
exactly.
video game king,
No,
but
no.
the kind that tear families apart. Gotcha.
Those ones, yeah, great. So, I think the Labor Party has a particular way of handing out the portfolios. Nick McKim and I were both corrections ministers at one time.
Yes.
We went to a
Yes.
national corrections ministers meeting. There was 2 Greens at the meeting. It was quite something.
Good God.
So
There you
don't-
go.
But yeah, I got the gaming portfolio and spent the whole term working with the industry and the advocates to sort of put in place a system where we had bet limits put on people to have accounts so that, people can still go and play the pokies. If that's your source of entertainment, good luck to you, but let's put some limits on it so that people don't have those really serious implications. And it got blocked. And now they bring in, the new minister has a slightly different take. And when I asked her questions in question time last week, I said, how much is this system going to cost? Because their big objection was how much the one we were putting in place would cost.
Mm.
And she said, oh, I don't have an answer for that because the clubs are going to pay for it.
Right.
And
Well,
so
that guarantees quality and makes sure that
Yeah.
people's interests are taken care of if the actual businesses are introducing this. Yeah.
and from a credibility point of view, the government doesn't even know how much their system is going to cost.
Yeah,
She's going to
that's
legislate it, but she can't tell me what it's going to cost. It's very extraordinary.
not my job, Shane, she said.
Go figure.
All right, shall we talk housing?
Let's do it.
We should. Otherwise, I'll get on a rant about pokies all afternoon. And
Yeah, okay, all right.
podcast does not need that. You guys have got, you got to keep it professional here.
I
Oh,
mean,
yes,
pokies
very
are
professional.
fucking evil, but yeah, we can just leave it there for now.
Yeah.
Starting yesterday under the Home Guarantee Scheme, Australia's first home buyers only need a 5% deposit. They don't need to pay lenders' mortgage insurance to the bank, and the federal government will act as guarantor. To access the scheme, the government's removed the ceiling on how much you can earn. How much you can borrow in each state and territory has been increased. In Queensland, it's up to $1 million in major cities.
What that's going to do is bring a lot of first-home buyers from Brisbane to Ipswich, and for $50,000 you're into $1 million property, no other fees, no mortgage insurance, no stamp duty, $50,000, you're in.
Everything in that $700 to $1 million gap I think that gap's going to close very, very quickly. It's actually a really big concern for us that, home ownership to young people may, in 7 years not even actually be a thing. And, you can either be born into a family who owns a home and maybe they can go guarantor for you, or you're not born into a family that owns a home and you can never have that dream.
The federal government predicts it'll only drive prices 0.5% over 6 years.
I'd really like to know what economic modelling is behind that, because the high-income earners who can qualify for the 5% deposit, they're just increasing demand at that bottom end of the market, and it's pushing all the prices up. Yeah, and it's consuming all the stock that might be on the market at that bottom price range.
But yes, housing, we want to talk about this. This has been a big focus, obviously, for the ACT Greens. And I understand the first bill that you folks introduced when you came back to Parliament after the last election was this bill to include housing as a human right in the ACT's Human Rights Act, I assume it's called. And last month it actually passed. You did it.
Yeah, finally, just a couple of weeks ago, it went through the Parliament, and we're really excited about it. Look, we took a proposal to the election. My former colleague, Rebecca Vazzarotti, who unfortunately lost her seat, put together a fantastic proposal to build 10,000 public homes over the next 10 years. We went and got it externally costed. We put it on the table and said, look, if we're serious about addressing the housing crisis, these are the sort of policies we need to be, as a government, investing in. Now, no one would support that, and I guess it stopped us. It caused us to stop and think, well, how do we change the debate? And that's where we got to, well, let's put housing into the Human Rights Act. It's a campaign many in the community sector have run for a long time. And we thought it's the time to actually put it in the legislation, and I'm really pleased that we did get it across the line.
Yeah.
For some of the community advocates, they've been working on this for like 20 years or more. It's fantastic to finally land it and reflect that community sentiment.
Yeah, what does it mean beyond just, it's now in the law, it reflects the community sentiment? What does that actually change in the way that, laws are made, or how does it affect people's lives in the ACT?
Yeah, look, there's sort of a technical answer to that and a policy answer to it. On a technical front, now that housing is a human right, it means that the government has to consider it when it's developing legislation and policy. There are what are called immediately realisable rights, so ones that they have to be focused on straight away, and there's 3 of those that are going into the legislation. And so that's things like you can't be discriminated against in housing, you cannot be arbitrarily evicted. So there's some basic ones there, and over time they will evolve consistent with international law. So that's the sort of technical element of it. I think the philosophical element is it will change the debate on housing. We've seen housing being commodified, and now actually our legislation says housing is a human right. And I think that changes the debate and the political and community discussion over time. So for me, there's sort of 2 elements to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely I have to say I have conflicting feelings about stuff like this, because I sort of think that, yes, if you have a Human Rights Act, it should include housing. That's such a fundamental, it's just a thing that, humans need to kind of thrive in any way in this world. But at the same time, there are broad critiques, some of which I agree with, that human rights legislation generally is like a nice tone setter. It's kind of good to have, but it's difficult to actually translate into concrete change, particularly when I don't know if it's the same. Maybe you can tell me. In Queensland, for example, we have a Human Rights Act. The government's meant to consider it with all of its lawmaking, but it can be suspended, and they've suspended it now multiple times whenever they like. If they can just go, oh, we've decided that we're suspending the Human Rights Act to pass this law because we acknowledge it is in contradiction with the law, but we're just suspending the Human Rights Act. Could that happen with this in the ACT?
There's, again, a couple of answers to that. I mean, yes, the Human Rights Act has never been overridden by the Parliament here in the Territory.
Must be nice to live in a jurisdiction that respects the Human Rights Act.
Well, indeed, different approach to it. And again, having been a minister a long time, it is really embedded in the way our public service works.
Mm.
You know, right at the beginning, when they're starting to think about a policy, that they call it the dialogue model. Yeah, and so right from the get-go, they're thinking about, well, how will this interact with the Human Rights Act? The Human Rights Commission is involved. They're having a say. And I've seen proposals come up for legislation that have been nixed at the cabinet point because they couldn't be made human rights compliant.
Huh, okay. I guess that's how it's meant to
a lot
work.
of people wouldn't be, yeah, and that is how it's supposed to work. And that, for me, is the best way for it to work. It's not sort of after the fact having an argument about it. It's fundamentally shaping how the law is being put together.
Mm.
But you're also right, and I think the critiques are right, that it can be seen as a bit symbolic.
Mm.
But what we also know is this will become subject to potential litigation in the future.
Mm.
And for the groups like our community legal centres who are representing people who are being done over in housing, will have a actual tool to go into court and litigate matters and change the law over time. So it's not going to have an instant impact. I think that critique is, if we want to make that critique, it's fair, but I think it will reshape both the law and the discussions over time. And so it's a bit more of a slow burn, but we need those things as well as the immediate actions. I'd love to have this plus the government commitment to be building more public housing because we need those things too.
What I'm hearing is that landlords will be sent to prison for human rights abuses. That's what I'm hearing, and I think that's fantastic. That's why I endorse this approach.
Greens win.
Am I remembering some scandal about Labor removing housing as a human right from the platform or something? Did that happen federally? Or
No,
didn't
we can't place that one.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Maybe I've forgotten that, Elsa.
Sounds plausible, but it's not.
Yeah, it sounds like something they would do.
I'm pretty sure that happened, but I could be misremembering, and I apologize. But it's interesting, isn't it? I remember FDR way back the day. He put out this like economic rights thing. Obviously, we talk about human rights, we talk about our political and civil rights all the time, which are all very nice and are transgressed in a variety of different ways by the government all the time in lots of different circumstances. But yes, the idea that you would then move that to economic material rights, like actually getting stuff as a human being and a citizen in our society, you actually deserve your material needs to be met by things like housing, food, healthcare, education, and a job, like actual stuff that you get. I think that's an important thing because I think that's the gap that liberal political civil rights, leave between delivering us a just society. If people don't actually have the material stuff they need to live a decent life, then the work isn't done and you can't get a fair society.
And I think as the Greens, we really come from a housing first place. We understand that basic policy need. And again, I've held portfolios like corrections and mental health in my time as a minister. And you see so clearly how fundamental that is to people's basic ability to function.
Yeah.
There's all these other things. If you want to get good mental health support, if you don't have somewhere to live, you just don't have the stability to then work on your mental health challenges. If you are living in poverty or living out of your car, you're much more likely to come in contact with the police and then spiral into the justice system. And so again, that basic supply of housing is so fundamental to all the other things that happen down the line.
Yeah.
Housing is a human right gone from the Labor platform, 14th of June 2023. An acknowledgement that housing is a basic human right has been removed from a draft of the Labor Party's new policy platform, prompting the Greens to claim the government is running away from the platform they were elected on. There you go.
It happened. It wasn't a fever dream. There you go. So the laws, it means that the government has to consider it when they're making decisions. And also, as you said, it kind of sets up this legal mechanism for challenging laws and other decisions that the government makes. Do you know how that will kind of work? Like, I know this is the first, ACT is the first jurisdiction in Australia that's made housing a human right, but presumably it is in place in other jurisdictions around the world. Do you know how it's kind of worked in other places?
Look, there are examples. I think it will evolve over time as well, and that's part of the beauty of having embedded in there. The international understanding of what a right to housing means is building over time, and it goes back to what are they called, these realisable rights or immediately realisable rights. It doesn't mean the government has to provide a house for everybody tomorrow. That's that notion of immediately realisable and then progressively realisable rights. So over time it will build up, but we will see that, there's those few immediately realisable rights in there now. More will be added over time into the legislation and you'll see that evolution as we go.
Yeah, yeah. What about I mean, my other thought around this is you could, even if the laws are sort of working, but then they work in Queensland, for example, there's human rights laws and the government goes, okay, so are we passing legislation? Are we making decisions that are prioritising fairness and affordability in housing? The issue is perhaps that the major parties continually buy, the property developer spin and the bank spin around what creates fairness and affordability. So prioritizing, for example, developers' ability to build, expensive and new apartments that are really just about them being able to make additional profits because there's no limit on how much they can charge, and we have a tax system that's set up to benefit investors. But the government goes, look at us, tick, yes, we have signed, we're acting in accordance with the Human Rights Act because the property developers say it's going to make things more affordable. Like, can we do anything about that?
Look, I think it goes to one of the critiques of this. Having housing as a human right is certainly not enough. It's not going to fix everything. There's no doubt about that. And all the points you touch on are such important ones, and we could add a dozen other things to the list. And it speaks to the fact that housing just needs to be worked on a number of fronts. We also need to deal with the tax concessions that operate at a federal level. Now, they're outside the remit of the ACT Assembly.
Yeah.
But our government should be making a case to the federal government that these things need to change. Frankly, as all the state and territory governments should be, because we're all seeing it. At the ground level, we know the problems. We need to invest more in public housing. We need to do inclusionary zoning so that, when a developer gets a big site, there needs to be a guarantee that some percentage will be built as public housing, some will be built as affordable housing, some might be built as community housing. There's a range of policy tools there. We need to be pulling all of these levers because we know the housing market is cooked.
Yeah.
There's no silver bullet, but there's a lot of levers out there we can pull that over time are going to fix it and bring it back from being just a wealth generating system.
Yeah. And I think I want to say as well that I obviously have all these concerns and critiques of this kind of legislative reform and whether it'll be enough. But I also time and again come back to on the question of housing and the fundamental problem at the root of this crisis in Australia, but also in other places around the world is, how housing is seen and the fact that it is treated not as a right, but as an investment opportunity. And that is at the core of the issue. And so I do think that needs to sit underneath all of the work that progressive movements like the Greens are doing on housing affordability. So I 100% agree with that.
I look forward to future LNP governments legislating that property investing is a human right. I'm sure that's coming down the pipeline at some point.
But there's a challenge for us as progressives and as the Greens to think about how we talk to people because there's lots of Australians out there. And I don't want to get into the mum and dad's investors trope, but there's lots of people out there they are just trying to look after their families and the system has been built to encourage them to do that.
Yes.
Of course.
So they're not bad people.
Yeah.
They are good people who are trying to look out for their families. And that's where I think as the Greens, we've got to work out how to talk to people and not alienate them.
Yeah.
For the decisions
we're letting them have one, Shade. We're letting you have one investment property. And then beyond that, you're a bad person.
No, but this is what we say. It's true. You are taught in Australia that, the best way that you are going to be set up, that you're going to be able to live a comfortable life and leave something for your kids, if you want to have kids, is to invest in property. Because you're unlikely to get it through your actual work, through your wages or through anything else. Right. So that's the only option that's presented to you. And so, yes, that is part of why, home ownership, property ownership, more to the point, is such a big part of the Australian dream. But I think as well about one thing that I feel as though I've learned or observed over the last few years of working in politics is the fact that I don't think a lot of people realize that political spin isn't even just sitting on top of the legislation. In Queensland, at least, this is the case that spin is built into the laws as well. The government will pass laws that are called the Housing Affordability Bill when it's actually a bill that is not going to make housing more affordable. It might make housing, more expensive. And that's the big challenge because it's how do you stop? We need to continually fight back against the LNP as well, but Labor selling their solutions that are really just handed to them by the property development and investment industry and the banks as for first home buyers. I wanted to kind of just quickly check in. I know it's not an ACT thing, but it's happened this week. The federal government's expanded 5% deposit scheme for first home buyers. That's come into effect this week. And we talked about it on the show before. I think we spoke with Max Chandler Mather about it on episode 172, if people want to go back and listen. But it was again in the news, and I saw that actually, of all people, I don't know, did either of you see this? The Barefoot Investor did like an op-ed on this.
No.
I saw a headline I didn't get to read. I saw a scathing critique of it on the 7:30 report, but probably in a similar vein. Yeah.
Yeah. And isn't that, I feel as though these critiques were really not as prominently covered when it was actually being considered, and it was like their policy ahead of the election. But anyway, now, everyone seems to be agreeing that it's going to push prices up. But this thing where and just to refresh anyone's memory, this is where if you're a first home buyer, you can purchase a property with just a 5% deposit. The government guarantees the rest up to the 20%, which means that you avoid lenders' mortgage insurance. And they've expanded it so that it has no income or place limits, and it has higher price caps, so more people get access. Treasury has already forecast that it'll increase house prices, but not significantly. But a lot of people are saying, yes, it's just going to push this rush into the market, and it'll push prices up. The Barefoot Investor, I think probably the headline that I saw, which maybe is what you saw, was, quote, "I'd bet my sheepdog Lucky's left testicle that they," being the Treasury's forecast, "will be wrong about it only increasing a little bit."
All right, dude. Put some shoes on and calm the fuck down. But
he's really – I haven't read his book. I don't really know anything about him. I didn't know that he was kind of like a little bit of a lefty, weirdly, because I just heard the name The Barefoot Investor and I was like, this sounds like nonsense to me. But no, this article is in what I assume is his classic style. Lots of flashy, fun words that are meant to kind of grab your attention and shit like that. But really astute. And, he says in this article that this is a policy that's, dressed up as a helping hand, but it's really just a shove into bigger debt. And his argument, I think, quite interestingly, is that it's not just stupidity on Labor's part. It's not just them thinking this is going to help when actually, whoops, they're going to be wrong, that it's actually them calculating, it's deliberately designed to protect and to grow property investor profits, acknowledging that probably the majority of their voters own property already. They want house prices to increase, and all while pretending to offer affordability. And ultimately, who's going to win the biggest out of this will be the banks, who are going to end up getting more interest from home buyers over the course of the loan. So that's just kind of I don't know if you have thoughts on this as well, Shane, but I did want to kind of bring that back up on the show now that it's come into effect, because it's a shithouse policy. Well, that's no pun intended. And it's just another thing that's sold as a solution, as affordability. It's probably going to make it worse.
No, those critiques, I've seen them. And as I say, the 7:30 report ran a very similar piece, slightly less colourfully, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But essentially making the same point with people observing that inflationary pressure that it will create, and it just becomes perverse.
Yeah.
When in fact, you just need to go over and start to deal with the tax concessions on the other side, and you would have a far more powerful impact.
Yeah.
But isn't it hard to campaign against? Because, of course, people say the housing crisis is terrible. The government should be doing more, but this seems to be something the government is doing. I can see how me as an individual or for my kids, this is going to work. So it might do something. It might help them get into the market a little bit quicker. I mean, you have to sort of meet that with, this systemic critique about how cooked the system is across the board. It's tricky, right? And obviously Labor thinks they're onto a winner here and are championing it all over the place. I think Albo was out there saying, young kids can buy a house now. You can get in on the Australian dream. How do you campaign on that, I suppose? How do you talk about it?
I think this is the great big challenge for us on a whole range of issues, is that these solutions are complex. And people have said it more succinctly than me, but a lie is much simpler than explaining the complex truth. And, this is the basis of the Trump presidency. And when you're trying to explain nuanced, complex responses, as the Attorney General, I had the same challenge. We worked very hard to build a justice reinvestment agenda here. The idea if we spend the money up front on addressing poverty and housing and various other things, we will actually make our community safer. And all the data shows it.
Yeah.
And all the research shows it. But then you get the Tories go out and say, we need more police.
Yeah.
Lock them up is much simpler, much easier.
Lock them up is a lot easier. Yeah, that is.
Build a bigger jail. I mean, we just saw the LNP in Queensland trumpeting the biggest jail Queensland's ever built and how this is going to make the community safer. And it's not.
No.
It won't.
Yeah.
Having a corrections portfolio for 8 years, and most people in jail are not genuinely evil people. They're there because they've got a mental health problem, a drug and alcohol problem, a trauma problem, an acquired brain injury. They've made some poor decisions along the way that have not been victimless. I'm not saying that. But the answer is not to simply cycle them through jail.
Well, and more to the point,
they will come back in.
They don't become better people from being in jail.
That's so weird. I can't believe it.
I was at our Aboriginal community controlled health organisation the other week, and I met a couple of guys who've benefited from these justice reinvestment programs that we put together while I was the minister. They've now got jobs. They've been reunited with their family. They're going real well, and there's pride in them. These guys are really upbeat about how their lives are so much better than when they were cycling through jail. It's hard work, but it's actually cheaper as well. It costs $200,000 a year to keep someone in jail here in the ACT. Think about what you can invest into a community service that will help keep them out of jail. It's going to be less than that.
Yeah.
It's a great analogy, right? Like the definition of insanity, doing the same thing, expecting different outcomes. So yes, tough on crime doesn't make us safer. Housing policies that do not do anything about the price of housing going down, like Labor literally saying we want to make housing more affordable. We also want house prices to continue rising. Well, surprise, surprise, that doesn't actually work and fix the problem you're talking about.
Yeah. And like one of the most depressing things as well is I think that maybe the ABC's coverage was talking about how people in the higher income brackets are now rushing to get in before the effects of this policy come into play and house prices rise, which means that while the lower income people are still scrambling, still trying to save even that 5% deposit, which would then mean they're still locked into a 95% repayment, nightmare. But they're the ones who are going to be facing higher prices because they're still trying to save. Like it really is it's really bleak and it's very depressing. That the op-ed that the Barefoot Investor wrote, I think towards the end, or maybe he finished with this line that was, quote, "One day renters will wake up, realise the game is rigged and evict their legislative landlords," being the major parties who continue making these laws, and I bloody well hope so. Maybe I should read this guy's book. Is he good? Have you read it? I've read his book.
Barefoot Investor, welcome to the revolution. I love it.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm going to go and Google him after this, though.
Yeah, really, it was good stuff. It was a good
I think
read.
My boyfriend's read his book. Yeah, I think he's all right.
Yeah, all right. But yes, I was thinking, speaking of landlords as well, I wanted to check in on renting stuff in the ACT because I feel like in the Greens' time in shared power with Labor, you were able to make quite a few gains on renters' rights, including, the big one that the Greens have really been fighting on across the country around rent caps, which I also feel as though, I never quite got my head across the rent cap situation in the ACT because there's all this conflicting reporting and information, and maybe it's helpful to run over briefly. My understanding is in the ACT, rent increases for a continuing tenancy are limited to 10% above CPI, and that's once every 12 months.
Correct.
Are there gaps in that existing, like obviously rent caps, good, that was something we were able to win, but are there problems with that as far as the Greens see it that they're trying to improve already?
Yeah, look, I think at one level it is a positive to have that. So it's CPI plus 10% of CPI or 110% of CPI. Some people say CPI is 3%, it means 13%. It doesn't mean that. It's not 10% above, it's 110% of CPI. But rents have gone up a lot in the ACT as well. And getting debates about why that's happened. I think one of the things that this does mean is that the real estate agents now say to the landlords, because you can only do it once a year and you're going to do it by this much, you should do it by this much every year. Whereas a landlord might otherwise go, we're not going to increase it this year, we'll do it in 2 years.
I'll be able to catch up later.
But also, we were hearing reports that people were being evicted because then they kick somebody out and then you can put the rent up by, say, 20%, bring a new tenant in. And so certainly we also managed to prohibit no no cause evictions last term, and I think that's an important part of that as well. So again, it's thinking about what are all the levers and how do they all fit together and trying to respond to this is the hardest part of writing legislation. Someone who's now done it for a while. You write legislation, you think for common sense. You've actually got to write it and push the margins at the edge. And what are the loopholes people are going to find and how do you work around them? And I think that's some of the biggest challenges in these spaces from a government regulation point of view.
Yeah. So because you say, yes, rents have increased significantly in the ACT. And I saw there's reporting in the Australian Financial Review saying, this proves that rent caps don't work. But then there's also reporting in the ABC, for example, that says that based on the actual rents in each of the Australian jurisdictions, the ACT was the only place where rents broadly kept pace with incomes since the pandemic. So that does seem like evidence of rent caps working.
Yeah, and then I think that you just get into some really complicated subtleties there. I think they're right, don't get me wrong. And, we actually argued we should go a little further and cap rents at 2% per annum.
2%.
Rather than having this sort of inflation-based formula because, that would again start to perhaps even have a stronger effect on, managing that gap between people's incomes and the increases in rents. So, but you also get into a range of other factors around. Some argue here that the land tax in the ACT pushes rents up. It's usually a supply issue. We've had very low vacancy rates for a long time, and the bottom line is landlords will charge what they can get. And if there is shortage of supply, then people are going to bid up. So you get into issues around, well, can you try and legislate rent against rent bidding? And we've worked on that. But then you get shadow stuff happening in the background. And so it's, the cause and effect is pretty complicated. And I find it really challenging to exactly nail it down. But you just got to keep playing whack-a-mole and ironing out the problems as you see them.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked about that in the show, right? Often rent caps are demonized and they said if you introduce rent caps, rents will go up and you'll reduce the amount of properties. I go, well, it's not that simple at all. And we're always talking about rent caps as part of a broader policy agenda, which is about, wresting control away somewhat from profit gouging landlords or investment companies, right? That's obviously part of the picture. And yes, while it is very complicated, it certainly isn't as simple as some would have us believe, which is rent caps equal higher renters and a lack of supply, because that doesn't seem to be necessarily the experience of the ACT. Is that fair to say?
And there's a somewhat bizarre argument there. People say, well, the landlords will leave the market. And they make it feel like the houses are going to magically disappear.
Yeah.
It's like, well, no, they'll go somewhere else. Either someone might actually now be able to buy a home because there's more available on the market and they'll stop being a renter. Again, they're just, they're simple lies that are hard to unpick.
Yeah, that one's, it's ridiculous. But even having said that, from what I understand, I also saw that investment didn't decrease in investors weren't leaving the market anyway in the ACT following the rent caps. So that actually just didn't even happen. So it is interesting. Yes, that the other critique of rent caps, or I guess it is, it's they're based on situations where they maybe haven't been done quite right. And it's there are regulatory settings where rent caps work. You just need to get them right. And I think things like ensuring that they carry over across tenancies, or that there are mechanisms to stop renters just being booted out and then they can increase the rent, all those sorts of things, ensuring that they're universal. It does work. It's it's you just gotta do it right. I saw and maybe one of the things that I think about with the successes that the ACT Greens have had, the things that you've been able to do in the ACT, maybe there's an argument that it's possible because it's small and you can kind of you have a bit of a smaller playground to work with and test things, almost like a large council, structurally as well as just size-wise. Do you think that helps? Is that true?
I think there's a couple of factors in the things we've been able to achieve here, and it goes to our climate targets as well. We've cut our emissions by 50% off a 1990 baseline. It's globally leading. And so, well, how does that happen? And I think there are two factors. You've certainly touched on one of them. One is we are small enough. We're big enough and small enough. We're big enough that you can try things out on a reasonable scale, but we're small enough that literally you can get all the stakeholders in a room in an afternoon and nut something out. At one level, it's very practical like that. But also our progressive electorate, which has returned progressive governments for some time now, and certainly the Greens have been able to get a foothold. And, if you look at climate policy, in the period in which we were able to start working on these climate targets and implement the policies and get them to take effect, federal government changed numerous times, and you saw all the changes in climate policy at a federal level. So there's a degree of both the progressive government and the continuity of that progressive government enables you to get on and steadily build things as well, rather than having, at a federal level, Labor might start saying, and the Libs and Nats come in and unpick it, and then you've got to start it again later. And so there's a cumulative impact there that makes a difference as well.
Yeah. Well, It seems as though you're kind of all seeing a little bit of that, or Labor even heading in that direction now that they are on their own. They introduced their first budget, their first solo budget, without being in government with the Greens, and were already trying to unpick some of the work that the Greens had done. Like, for example, this rent relief fund, they tried to cut that apparently.
No, they have cut it. Look, it's so frustrating. Okay. It's such a success story. This is a program, we did start it during COVID. It was sort of set up as initially a temporary measure where what it did was it paid people 4 weeks of rent to help them not lose their tenancy.
Okay.
And it went really well during COVID, and it reflected the fact that people were losing work and, all the things that were happening during COVID. And we did it in partnership with a local non-government organisation called CARE. They're a financial counselling service, and they basically administered it. And they did the checking, and it wasn't means tested specifically, but there was a degree of that attached. You had to be in financial distress.
Yeah.
And it worked so well that we actually brought it back because the housing market was still cooked. People were still struggling.
Yeah.
Cost of living was out of control. And we found it was working really well where people did lose their job or they got an unexpected bill. Their car broke down, they had to repair it. They got a big health expense they weren't expecting. All these things that happen in people's lives where they're maintaining a tenancy, often bit by the skin of their teeth, but they're sort of going okay. But one thing could knock them out and they could end up out of their home and potentially homeless. And so we actually brought it back, and it's been so effective. And it worked well because also it was with the NGO who then often other financial counselling, help people work on their budgets. And so you got this quite effective scheme, and it's kept 1,400 households in their tenancy in the last couple of years. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
When you've got a massive public housing waiting list, keeping people in private tenancies makes a real difference. And it's so frustrating to see it nixed. It's only $1.7 million a year.
But Labor was like, we need to spend 8 times as much as that, or whatever it is, on horse racing.
For example, we just finally brought in a bit of a tax on short-term rentals on your Airbnbs and stuff. That's expected to generate $5 or $6 million a year. It's like that could pay for this program.
That. Yeah. I saw something that you had posted, though, that you got some sort of replacement scheme at least. You got some win after this.
Yeah, look, I think it's going to come back in some forms. There's been this very concerted community campaign. We've just pursued the government relentlessly over it. And I think they're looking at it now going, we probably got that wrong, but they don't want to admit they got it wrong. So they're now going to bring back an emergency release program that'll be something like it, hopefully. Details to be revealed.
Yes. Well, we might have to leave it there, I think. But thank you so much, Shane Rattenbury, for joining us on the show. It is great to know that the ACT Greens are still in there fighting the good fight. And thank you very much for being very generous with your time and laying out, all your progress. It's lovely to meet you and have you on the show.
No, thanks so much for having me. Good to see you guys.
Thanks, Shane.
Thanks, Shane. Shane Rattenbury, everybody. Thanks very much, man. A quick call to action plug. Once again, I've mentioned it before, a night of humanity for Palestine. You got to come along if you're in Gadigal country in Sydney on Thursday, October the 16th at Enmore Theatre. Emerald, are you going to be flying specifically to Sydney to come see me perform on stage? Brutal.
I guess I'm a Palestine hater. Bad person.
You Zionist staying in Brisbane. You'll be missing out on a fantastic show, comedy, serious discussion, music. It's going to be awesome. Earth Boys there. It's hosted by Julia Zamiro and Patrick Abud, Jan Fran, friend of the show, Abby Ramikas. I'm going to be doing some comedy. It's going to be, I think, a really special night, and all the profits are donated to Palestine Australia Relief and Action, Olive Kids, the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund, and Médecins Sans Frontières.
Oui.
Thursday, October the 16th at Enmore Theatre in Sydney. We'll put the link for tickets in the show notes. Would love to see some Danger Dogs out there. Come along.
Sounds delightful. If you liked the show, please leave us a 5-star review. We like it very much when you do that. Again, yes, get tickets for the live show if you haven't got them already. All the info is linked in our social media profiles, which are at Serious Danger AU on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. See you there.
Bye.
Serious Danger Australia.